Today we're going to be talking about public engagement through the natural hazard mitigation planning process. I think it's a great topic. It's one that really just the general community engagement, what's got me interested in just general community planning. Today we have Amanda Sayok, our Region 10 mitigation planner, will be joining us, helping to keep track of the questions that come in. We also have Mike Howard from University of Oregon's Partnership for Disaster Resilience. He'll be speaking about the household surveys that they do in Oregon through the local hazard mitigation planning processes. We have Derek Hebert from the State of Washington Mitigation or Emergency Management. He's the mitigation strategist. He is going to be speaking about work he did prior to being with the state. It's with the city of Everett and some World Cafe engagement or forums that they did. So I welcome both Mike and Derek to today's webinar. Again, we are recording this webinar. We have a lot of materials that are available for you to download afterwards, and please look for the links that will come out afterwards. Becca will send those off. So as I said, community engagement is really what got me into community planning, and it was my experience in the Peace Corps. My wife and I were volunteers back in 2004, 2005 in Armenia. Armenia, for those who may not know, is a smaller country just north of Iran. Beautiful part of the world, wonderful people, culture, wonderful landscape. But part of going in there, of course, as a volunteer is to learn what the needs are, to share your experience, to learn from them. And one of those exercises that we did was community mapping. And I worked with kids as an environmental education volunteer, and we would go and have them draw the maps of just draw your area. What's your community look like to you? What's important? And it was through this process that in working with another site mate of mine that this playground was an important part for their community in the buildings, but it was also neglected. And as a result of this mapping and seeing what was important to them, we were able to get some funding then that helped to drive some change for them. Something that they want. The kids were coming out. We got community, the bottom right, to come out and help paint. We were buy the materials, get the playgrounds. But this is it's a simple example of what we're trying to do in mitigation planning, of just going out through this public engagement in mitigation planning. Go out, talk to engage a particular group or many groups, see what those needs are that then help focus where those resources are going, rather than just maybe doing it without them and thinking this is the best way. So today I hope you guys are going to be able to identify why public engagement is important, understand what to consider in the development of an outreach strategy, how to improve strategies to engage different populations of the community, learn the mitigation planning public engagement requirements in the Code of Federal Regulations, and identify hazard mitigation plans that have best practices of public engagement. There are so many topics and studies on public and community engagement. There's no way we can cover it all today. I hope to give you guys, I think the key part here is just, from what I've read and experienced in mitigation plans, I hope to take it to the next level in terms of, let's look at a strategy. What does that entail? And we may not get to the specific details for every different method that you guys will use out there, but there are certain things that I think I've seen lacking that I think we can think ahead of time and can help improve our community engagement as we're developing the plans themselves. So hopefully you get something out of this. A lot of great examples to push out here. And again, a lot of resources that are available for downloading afterwards. So you've seen this slide if you've joined us the last two sessions. What is mitigation? What are we talking about here? It's the reduction or elimination of long-term risk to human life and property from hazards. You can see mitigation permeates through most of the life of emergency management activities. It's what we're doing ahead of a disaster. We're trying to break that cycle of a disaster happening, impacts, and we rebuild, and it happens again. We want to break that cycle through mitigation. As we had shown before, mitigation does help increase resiliency. And I highlighted, when we were talking about mitigation planning and actions, last time we were talking about the planning team being the foundation here. And in this case, you can see I highlighted what we're looking at is to help educate, build relationships, to learn from the public and the communities. Because eventually, when we start talking about strategies here in a few months, this is what it's going to help drive. So what's public engagement? A lot of different terminology out there about it. People might say civic engagement, community engagement, participatory democracy, a lot of different terms, but it's and I admit, you know, I pulled this particular definition off Wikipedia, but after looking around, this pretty much sums it up. There's a lot of people who have different nuances on we approaching it, but community engagement refers to the process by which organizations and individuals build ongoing, permanent relationships for the purpose of applying a collective vision for the benefit of a community. I think a key part here, ongoing, and I like relationships, because that's, you know, that means we're trying to be active in who we're reaching out to. I think that's a really key part here. And of course, the collective vision. Everyone comes in together to help say, how are we going to be a stronger, a safer community in terms of the natural hazards. So let me get to the fun part, Code of Federal Regulations. As we know on our webinars here, we're not trying to focus on the requirements. What we're trying to focus on is quality planning processes and quality plans. But we have requirements right off the bat. I want to kind of highlight those, and we have both local and tribal. And the first two bullet points here really do apply to both our tribes and local plans. So the plan must document how the public was given the opportunity to be involved in the planning process and how their feedback was incorporated into the plan. And then second, the opportunity for participation must occur during the plan development, which is prior to the comment period on the final plan and prior to the plan approval. For tribes, the addition is they have to include a description of how the Indian tribal government defined the public. Really key part here, and just a little bit of a distinction. But I want to just highlight something. I underlined the word given the opportunity. We didn't say they had to engage. You had to get 100 people or even one. It says given the opportunity. And that's sometimes, it's a real, and I say it's a low standard because I think what we should be striving for is we didn't get the opportunity. We actually were able to engage. Is it easy? No, it's not. We get that for a lot of planning processes. But I like to see if we can help elevate and raise the bar a little bit. And another part here, feedback was incorporated. So we asked that when feedback is provided on the plans, you document the feedback and then how that was incorporated into the plans. And of course, it must occur prior or during the plan development. Not just, hey, we got the plan, can some people comment on it? You know what? That's you've missed you've missed the boat here. Let's put it that way. So what we're asking, you know, some opportunities during the development of the plans that you can engage in. We're going to talk about that here. So this is about when the plan's being developed, what to do. And then we have another requirement on continued public engagement requirements. And we ask that the plan must describe how the jurisdictions will continue to seek public participation after it's been approved. So as you guys might know, the mitigation plans are 5 years. And during that life cycle, we have a requirement saying, describe how you're going to continue to engage the public. It doesn't mean that you have to say, hey, here's the plan, can you guys comment on it? That's not at all. I think what we look at is, are you guys continually to educate, learn from the community about the hazards? Are you maybe doing some community mapping? Are you going to some community events maybe once a year? I think sometimes you might find folks are saying, well, it was in the library and people could come and ask for it and provide a comment. That's not really engaging your public there. Let's try to go above. Let's try to make a little bit of an effort here, and that's what we're trying to push and encourage through this webinar. So what can we as the developers, those of us that are making these plans at the local level, what can we learn from the public? Well, they can help focus community investments. Where should we be going? We can start to understand the disaster and resilience history of the community. They can start telling us their stories. We gain different perspectives. That's so key part here on starting to get into buy-in and consensus. Understand the messages that do and do not resonate. We realize that certain messages that we might try in Idaho are going to look different than Alaska. We know messages that start with within populations of those that are in business community or in the business world versus those that might be working out in natural resources might look different. We understand that the young population and the older population might have different messages, and we have to we want to understand those. We get insight into efforts the public is currently taking to mitigate disaster, and we begin to build consensus to improve opportunities for implementation. I like this little, this image here is from the city of Seattle, and they did one of the, I love sticky dots, and they have this on. They want to know, ask the participants, where should we spend our money? And they had their strategies here. And so that was their, one of their exercises to do this. What can the public learn from us? They can learn who we are and why we're doing this. We can start to, they understand the strategies that we're considering, understand where funding is available. We are able to educate about hazards and risk. We can, they learn us from us how to mitigate and prepare for disasters. We can start to share stories. Such a key part here, storytelling. It's not about the facts. Facts sometimes don't go anywhere, but when you have a compelling story, and that's both sides. It's us as the those with mitigation expertise, but it's also, of course, from the public. They have the compelling stories, and we want to be able to hear those and share them. And of course, maps to understand risk. I love maps. I know many of you. I'm looking at you, Amanda. We love maps. You know, maps are a great thing. They tell a story too, and it's great to get out there to help start to show how our community is either we have vulnerable areas or less vulnerable areas. But you know what? We have work to do. And so I got a couple of things that some studies. The Natural Hazard Mitigation Association, I think I'm looking down the list, a few of you are a part of that, put together a paper a few years ago. And it basically is on how to improve local mitigation planning. It said even plans that meet regulatory requirements may still fail to gain full participation of key stakeholders or the community at large. And as a result, they had some recommendations to include foster relationships with other groups to promote planning among several programs. Local planners should develop a community-specific public outreach strategy. And every community should be opportunistic and seek to maximize partnerships. In addition, there's another one that came out, University of North Carolina Institute for the Environment and Coastal Hazards Center. They looked at 6 states, 175 plans. And through this, what they found was that few plans noted that targeted outreach or citizen advisory committees had been used. They had described a process, but what happened is when you didn't have the focus groups or the surveys, they're kind of maybe, just saying, hey, come to the general commissioners meeting and people can speak and have their testimony provided and comments brought in. But what they're asking here, we're going to show you, is did we focus our efforts? Did we get out and target groups? Did we get the surveys out there? And that's where they're saying that was lacking. And so it doesn't mean it didn't meet requirements, but it's saying how can we improve upon it so that our plans become more implementable and we actually are having a greater effect with becoming more resilient. So at this point, I'm going to open up a poll because I would like to know from you, I got to open my poll session here, what you're doing to engage the public during the mitigation planning process. So I got just a few options because we're going to kind of go through some of these, but what are you doing for this part? And so to help bring people in and to make sure it's inclusive, or maybe then what you're thinking as a planning team, just trying to get an idea as you're the plan developer to just again, since from those, I know not everyone's Region 10. We got a lot of people. I think we got a few international that are on this, but just be curious what we're doing here. I know the poll, I don't think it can be seen at the moment, so I'm going to, right now what it looks like, a lot of, well, pretty across the board that, I think you can do multiple choices, by the way. An outreach strategy, which is great. A lot of people, that's exciting to see that this is being developed. Say, hey, we got people who come teach this webinar. We're be doing pretty good here. We develop messaging, good. Oh, it just closed here. I'm just going to quickly go and I'll let it do its thing. But actually, across the board, not everyone's doing everything. But the one thing I noticed on here is, yeah, you guys, a good third of you, a little over 30 of you, are creating an outreach strategy, which is great. Of course, there's a lot of no answers. Food and beverage, always about third also. Some incorporating comments. You're creating specific products, a little bit smaller. Offering different venues. I think that's such a huge part, especially in these multi-jurisdictional plans. Are we actually going around to where the people are at? So, awesome. Thank you. And so, planning team. How do you fit in on this? First of all, if you guys might remember in our last month's session, we have our planning team that's is integral to engaging the community, to developing the plan, to promoting this with our leadership. The role of the planning team. What do you guys need to do to help set up the community engagement? What's the strategy that you're going to be working with? So the planning team help create trust within the community, helps to identify who's going to lead this engagement strategy. Are you going to have a contractor come in? Or do you have a local champion, someone that's at the local level that might want to help do this? Do you have a community planners? If you're the emergency manager and you're leading this, and really great opportunity to engage community planning. It's not just land use, but using those skill sets of the community planners to come in and be able to facilitate the process, maybe one of the forums or help advertise it. Contractor, let's say you guys are doing this plan in-house and you might just want to go out and get a firm, someone who might just want to help do the public engagement piece of this. That's great. And next month we're going to talk about FEMA planning grants and how you guys can use for that. The planning team helps to brainstorm outreach activities to help coordinate and facilitate communication. And then in developing the outreach strategy for all jurisdictions, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute for multi-jurisdictional, but putting the questions out there. When you're going to do outreach, what questions are you trying to answer? Who are your stakeholders? Who in your community do you want to try to make sure we're hitting? What populations? The how of the messages and the methods that you're going to be using. Again, it varies, and we're going to show you a few examples, whether it's social media you'll be using or other forms. And of course, your schedule. When are we doing this? Okay, if our plan update process is over the next year, when should we be targeting groups? Or now that your plan's in place, how should we be rolling this out over the next 5 years and continuing to make sure people are aware? For those of us in the West who've been doing this Cascadia exercising, rising, I mean, there is so much discussion going on right now with earthquakes. I don't care what your hazard is, you guys should be really building up upon that, whether you're going to be hitting wildfire, you want to do flood. It's just on people's minds right now, so taking advantage of that. And of course, the team, evaluate and incorporate feedback. That is important. It is showing that you've heard, and it's important not because FEMA said it's a requirement. It's important because you are now telling the public we're hearing you. This is how your comments and thoughts have been incorporated. Or if they haven't, then of course you think you need to recognize what hasn't been incorporated. But it is closing that loop. So some tips on this, and I mentioned earlier, the storytelling works better than fact sharing. Getting compelling stories. This is what it means to me, not just facts. Here's another number for people. Having them, I had someone, for those who might know Roy, right? He used to say, never tell a story without a number and a number without a story. And I think that's a very good point too there, to have both of those bring in there, because it helps to show that, there's that quantitative and qualitative way to put it. But I think it's coming down to people use emotions, and that begins to help resonate better, or be able to resonate more with the community members. Look for other community events, existing planning processes. Hey, you guys don't have to do this. Have your own separate thing. Let's say there's a parks plan update going on. They're doing a community event. Hey, maybe we'll have a booth or we can help engage it. There's a connection between maybe the parks, open space, floodplain restoration going out there, or if you're going to be doing some wildlife, maybe some defensible space or fields reduction work. You have some opportunities to help combine these. Plan in advance, of course. Don't just try to do it, hey, next week we're going to do this. Be deliberate. Tokenism doesn't encourage buyism. Doesn't encourage buy-in. Tokenism being, hey, we just threw it out there and hopefully somebody commented. It was on the website for 2 weeks. We kind of advertised it, but not really. No, be deliberate about where you're going. Inclusive, 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 and inclusive. Accessible locations, 508, trying to think of those with disabilities, thinking about the different locations around your community or communities. Weekend, weekday events, food, hey, working people, got daycare available. Think about these things as we're trying to bring in a more inclusive audience. We know that what the work we're doing, it touches everybody in the community. That is a fact. Now, how do we get out there and start to engage them? That's the more challenging part here. I like this this bottom right. Well, besides having food, by the way, which I think this donut picture is going to make every presentation I do. I like donuts. The part here, though, about public workshops, the tribe, this is the Grand Ronde in Oregon. And they actually incorporated where they had the powwows, and which is great. You're going to where they're at. We had an audience. They were able to have a survey there. So just one example of what the Grand Ronde did. Love that. Multi-jurisdictional. So when you're doing multi-jurisdictional plans, all participants must be part of this and must engage their communities. It doesn't just, hey, if you're a multi-jurisdictional plan and the county's doing it, the towns don't go, whoo, the county's doing it. They're going to do it over in their area, and that's great. Let's think a little bit better here about working around the county. I'm not saying every single, especially if you have these really small rural areas that maybe there's a collection of them. Maybe you hit one and people might come. But going beyond just to say it was on the county's website and that's what worked. Let's try to do multiple touch points throughout this county and be deliberate. Coordination must occur between the various entities that are part of the plan here. I like this example in Idaho. You can see there was they went to 3 different areas within this county for their public event. In this case, this is Idaho County, and they advertised that they have their flyer, but they moved around to the evening sessions to help engage some of our those communities here. Really key part here. So the journey, and this is going to be really focusing the rest of our presentation here. And when we get to the engagement method, that's when we're going to have both Mike from OPDR and Derek from Washington are going to be speaking there. So timeline, audience, activity plans, the message. This here is an example from the city of Seattle. It's the table of contents for their engagement strategy for the mitigation plan. And I've got, this will be one of the materials you can download. City of Seattle and City of Portland have both agreed to allow you guys to look, bring these, they're in their mitigation plans, but, we've got it here to help just make an easy download. I know those are large cities like this where you're looking at this, but I think there's a lot of elements no matter where you're at that can really speak to, even if you're rural or you're in a large urban or middle size community. But, project scope, public engagement objectives, different outreach, the strategy, the messaging, but they kind of laid out a plan for this. So timeline. Here's an example of what we got of when you should be engaging. I'm not saying you have to do all this, but I want, if you kind of think like, well, what should I do as we're developing or updating the plan? These might be some opportunities. You just got a planning grant, maybe from Fema. It's a great time to announce loudly, hey, we got this going on. This is something we're moving forward. Don't keep it quiet. Announce it. Now, I know some people go, oh, no, the louder we are, the more people are going to join. That's great. And now we're holding you accountable, and that's okay. But, put the press release out there. Get the social media people, or just use social media to announce that you got this grant. This is a wonderful opportunity. You have a kickoff meeting. Usually maybe you use a public workshop, maybe an art or writing contest to help educate and identify for people, you can identify where they should be involved through the process. Maybe do a community capability assessment using a focus group around to say, hey, what are your capabilities, you as the utility or districts or the schools or even within the departments of your city or county. Risk assessment development, listening, maybe focus group to listen to the needs from the population. Strategy development. This is the part I think is really key is perhaps you've gone through your plan, you haven't engaged the public yet, and now you're developing some strategies. Let's get the community to say, where should we be investing our money here? Go ahead and engage them. It can be through a survey. It can be public workshops, forums. Really good part, really, I think, incremental or instrumental part to engage the public. Now that you have a draft plan, now that you've got something for people to fully comment on, bring them on in. Plan adoption, press release, celebrate success. We did it. We've got something that's awesome. We thank you for all your public comments and being part of this. We've listened, and here's what we're doing. And of course, we're looking at implementation and maintenance, annual events, fair, press releases. You know, celebrate project completions and continue to educate. If we finish this plan and we didn't really engage our public and we put it back on the shelf in the end, and if people get frustrated, we didn't know about this and we had the disaster. I mean, you got to take a look at yourselves and your process and say, did we think about this in the first place? And you know, you want to get out there. Don't hold this in. Use social media, websites, the news media throughout your process. Here's an example from Portland. This is what they had a diagram of their engagement plan of stakeholder participation, the community survey, the different focus groups they did, planning for real, for those who might be familiar with that. They had a timeline for the draft mitigation plan review, what events, adoption, and continue engagement. So you can see these touch points. You know, this is a great visual, but they have a lot behind this in their engagement plan. I also realize level of effort increases as you engage more people. Fully get it. It's a much smaller effort when it's maybe just the planning team or a few stakeholders that you're bringing in, such as another jurisdiction or maybe someone, a subject matter expert from the university or one or two organizations. But as we start engaging the public, it's a lot more. But it is coming down to more buy-in with our public, our communities, the better our plans get developed because we have their input, the buy-in, not 100%, but we're getting it. And hopefully it becomes two better plans in terms of implementing them. And I think doing this too, you guys have this opportunity not just to obviously influence mitigation, but preparedness for people to be ready when it's time to respond and recover. Use this steady state, use this process to get a lot done. Choose a theme. I don't know if you guys knew about, maybe you guys did, but I didn't know that we had this calendar, and that's silly. This is from ready.gov, and thank my external affairs folks here to point this to me. This is a calendar. You know, we have different themes throughout the year. I knew May, though, was Wildfire Community Preparedness Month, or Preparedness Day, but it's a month. We're doing a lot of stuff around here. But did you also maybe know some of these other ones here? So as you're doing your outreach, maybe theme it around what month you guys are going to be doing it and what the hazards are. A great opportunity, not just for doing an event post, your plan adoption, but also during this. All right, audience. Who's our audience? Well, it's everybody. All right, it is everybody. But got to think about this a little more thoughtfully, I guess you might put it. So this example here is one of them from an engagement plan. This is Portland. So they went through and identified all the different organizations, or a lot of them. It's probably not everyone in the city, but it is a pretty healthy list. But what I like is it says, you know, it describes the organizations, and it says potential opportunities for collaboration. And they kind of spill out in this place of where engaging accessible people with disabilities, they might have interest with potential risks from natural hazards. So you start seeing the linkage of who they are, what we might be able to get, as well as what's that connection with the work we're doing in risk assessment. And they have, and so this list, though, obviously this list is, they can use this more than just this mitigation plan process. This can inform a variety of activities that are going on. But the thought went into it first to recognize who are the organizations and the people in my community, then how do I engage them and where do we have common ground? It took some time. Like I said, it's a very long list, but I think for other communities, maybe it varies. You know, just start off small and it builds up. But it's putting the thought into it, because that's going to inform your messages and where you're going to go and how you reach them. But you can see we got a variety of different audiences, and these are the ones to be thinking about, because you might want to target some of these depending on what the questions are you're trying to get answered. So this is an activity plan. You know, as you're thinking about the audience, and now we've got activities plans that we're thinking of putting together, thinking about format, durations. This one, again, the Portland, this was some of the outcomes that they were trying to establish from that activity. What are some of the follow-up activities and the measures of performance? Key part, you know, really thinking about what are we doing? How are we going to get out there and do this? What's the reason why am I doing a survey in the first place? Or why am I going to go put all this time into a public workshop? Boom, there you go. We're starting to lay it out. Planning team, getting it out there and putting these together. All right, here FEMA help assist. You know, we got our partners in Oregon as well as Washington. They actually really help FEMA help support them in Grace Harbor County and Cannon Beach. Fun runs. I don't know if you guys got those or have heard of them, but love a good fun run. So what they did is based it off the tsunami evacuation routes, and they were put together something called Race the Wave, and great opportunity to bring people out. It was based on some of the local evacuation routes, and they put these plans together. What are the messages, timelines, and products for that event? Again, we have this as a download for you guys. Mitigation messages. Thinking about this. These are some messages that you might use as you're going out to reach people. It's key to kind of break it down by maybe different who the different audiences are. You know, number 4, planning guides, private investment to areas that are safe and in ways that are more resilient to known hazards. Thinking about our business sector. Like this, number 7, wildfire is an essential natural process under the right conditions. Really, you know, trying to think around hazards and what we're doing. But homes don't have to burn. They don't. Thinking about the second one, mitigation includes planning for development in smarter and safer areas, bringing in our community planners and thinking about people from the real estate industry and from those who just want to build homes. And with that, framing the questions. How do we frame these in a way, just not say it's disasters and it's injuries and impacts? No, we want to frame it in a way that's compelling to people. So this one, I took this. This is a study back. It's in the Journal of Environmental Planning. Godshock, a lot of people might be familiar with a lot of the work that he's done from North Carolina. Flood hazard mitigation can be designed to provide quality of life improvements, such as when a floodplain is redeveloped as a riverfront park and greenway. Mitigation programs typically affect greater numbers of poor households, so residential hazard proofing can be built into disadvantaged neighboring upgrading programs. Thinking about those different audiences, thinking about affordable housing, I mean, a great way to bring these connections. In the bottom, deciding where and when to retrofit are both hazard mitigation issues and land use policy issues with related concerns for environmental protection, fairness, and quality of life. So you can see we've got tie-ins with what just is going on in our community, and that's the way to bring this in. Frame it in a way that people can find what it means to them. All right. Before we start, Joan, I'm going to get into our second poll. What do you guys currently do to engage your public here? So we've got a few different options, and I think it's multiple choice. So before we were asking you what different things in terms of strategies and stuff do you do, but what methods are you guys using currently? All right, just going to be a few here. So I'm just looking at the numbers. Community events, a big one. Interviews, testimonies, not too big on that one, or not a lot of people. News media, maybe about a third of you making presentations and questionnaires, surveys, about a third. Roundtables, forums, a little bit smaller. And a little polling thing came up here. I can't see the rest. What else we got here? And my screen locked up here while this is doing it. Nonetheless, it looks like, though, community events, just setting up maybe at a preparedness fair or just setting up the tables or just going out and engaging. Well, I don't want to speak on behalf of what a community event means to you, but obviously we can see that there are the contest is the lowest one here. Not a lot of that going on here. So, all right. So let me kind of get going here on some of the methods here. We have we got the community events, roundtables, storytelling, interviews, the media, presentations to consider, questionnaires, focus groups, social media, websites, art, essay contest. So much options. So think about in the next plan that it's not we just posted on the website and hopefully people commented, or they came to just the public officials meeting and they commented. We have a lot of options here, and let's start taking that into consideration. So in Alaska, we had some options. They did the public meeting and survey combination here. Not just people attend, but they did some survey announcements. Bristol Bay Borough was doing this one here. And I realized we scale it to what's appropriate for our jurisdictions. That's a key part here. press releases in Idaho. I like this. 3 different press releases throughout their event. They did the inform the public initially about this process. They did a flyer announcing the public meeting dates, and then the 3rd one letting them know about the comment period when it was available. Really good part to have it 3 different times they were doing the press releases. Our own Susan Cleverly there, a state Idaho mitigation officer. They have a flood table, which these 2 kids are playing at it, and they use that to help engage, and they let communities borrow it, and they also do it for their state mitigation plan. They were using this as a way to show land use. If you let water go here, what's going to flood? Can you move things so that then the water doesn't go and touch, buildings and things? So great way to engage and see people of how we can mitigate and get people out of harm's way. Community workshop, the Quinault Indian Nation, food, presentation. You see community members coming out here. You can see their agenda. Another good one to recognize that this was going on. The website, social media. We got a lot. This is a event, again, this is that fun run that we're talking about. They did all this ahead of time. What are some of the hashtags? By the way, all these examples like this one, I've got this available for you guys that you'll be able to use and see. And again, some of these others that we're showing. They have depending on what part of the timeline they are to do the event, they got the different messaging that they would tweet out. So they're pre-identifying what this looks like. And focus groups. Eugene Springfield did 11 different focus groups for their community engagement, an extensive plan. They did a lot around the climate change, and this was wonderful in terms of how many groups they brought in. They also say it's a lot of work, but a lot of good information on how now they're to be used in implementation. So with that, I want to turn it to Mike Howard. He's going to talk about surveys, and I'll let Mike introduce himself right now.
Morning, everybody. What Brett has on the cover on the slide right now is a sample of a household survey that we typically send out. It is also in it's worksheet 3.1 in the mitigation guidance, I believe. Brett, correct me on the correct document if you want. But
sorry, yeah. I was just going to say you're right. That was for those who have the local mitigation planning handbook. We have the survey in the back, and that was put together by the organization Mike works for, the Oregon Partnership for Disaster Resilience.
Good. And a little bit more on the Partnership for Disaster Resilience. We're located at the University of Oregon, and we're a program area of the Community Service Center. Our group works kind of a collaborative group between the University of Oregon, students at the university, and then we partner with local governments and private sector individuals to accomplish disaster mitigation and resilience in the state of Oregon. We have been around since about 1999 and have worked with virtually every county and city at one point or other within the state of Oregon to work on mitigation or resilience issues. What I was hoping to go through today was a little bit of how to design surveys and move forward with that. There are 9 key steps that we keep in mind when we're creating surveys. Brett has touched on quite a number of these in his discussion, so I'll keep my conversation here a little bit brief, but we can certainly take questions later on these. Some of the big things that you want to look at, though, are what the objectives of the survey are, what's the purpose, who do you want to survey, what kind of accuracy you need, and really think about the end product and how this is going to inform your mitigation planning process. Then there are some other considerations that you want to make that are more specific to the types of questions that you are writing, the questions, the wording of the questions, sequence of questions, and really develop it in a way that is going to reach the audience that you're going to go into. I'll try to touch on those as I go through my next few slides. So we created, can you go to the next slide? We created a survey for the Upper Sandy River, which is in Clackamas County, just outside of Portland, Oregon. And the purpose of this survey was to further the county's understanding of residents' attitudes and opinions about managing flood risk in the Upper Sandy River Basin. The county determined that the survey results would be summarized and used to inform future decisions about flood risk management. Those survey questions will lead into their mitigation planning process, which is starting this year, as a way to help inform their steering committee and other stakeholders of residents' opinions on flood risk. So next slide, please. So the purpose, again, what we were looking for is to understand the community's risk tolerance. We wanted to know how risk averse or risk tolerant the community was. We wanted to know what the community felt should be their responsibility and what they thought was the government's responsibility. We also wanted to know a little bit more about residents' attitudes towards individual policies considered by the county and their perceptions and understanding of property rights and how that fits into their decisions towards policy choices. And we also wanted to know what opportunities would make residents want to move away or what kind of individual choices they would make on their own. Next slide, please. So in putting this together, we wanted to make sure that in the report and in the feedback that we expressly stated the purpose of the survey itself and what kind of categories of questions that we put in. We wanted to make it explicit what we were aiming to achieve out of the survey and put it together in an attractive document that the public would be find easy to read and accessible. Next slide. So our methods for the survey, we had a survey development team that considered what the purpose was and objectives, clarified what they wanted to achieve out of the survey, and they developed a number of questions through an iterative process that involved stakeholders, folks on their development team, as well as individuals here at the University of Oregon. They created a county website landing page. That landing page was used as a reference to individuals who received a postcard from the county. A postcard was sent out to approximately 44,000 addresses in the Upper Sandy Basin. That postcard had a link to the county website, and upon that website there was a map that the respondent could enter their information into. Can you go back to the previous slide? That could show that they had where their property was in relation to the floodplain, and then they would be led towards the survey itself. The postcard, one of the lessons that we did learn from that was that it isn't really a useful, it's not very useful to have a web link on a postcard since people can't click on it. We also had a QRL code that also was not very easy for folks to interact with. Next slide. Other ways, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay. Other things that you could do that we found have worked really well is to use social media, particularly for communities that are already actively using social media. Here we have an example of the city of Turner, where we've done lots of work with developing surveys. We had a park survey that we put out recently where the community got great response, in part because they actively run and manage their Facebook site. The city is about just over 1,900 people in size, and they have over 1,400 followers on their website, on their Facebook page, so they were able to get a lot of great response based on the fact that they're actively managing that page. You could also send out via email lists. In the Sandy River example, we had a watershed council email out their lists to make sure that the survey reached those folks. We also put copies or reference to the survey in newspapers, and keep some hard copies around so that you can hand them out when people come into your offices. Next slide. And in order to maximize response rates, there are quite a number of things that you could do to assist in getting folks to fill out your surveys. We really promote the getting an endorsement from someone in the community. We recommend a mayor, a commissioner, maybe your emergency manager, someone who folks in your community will recognize and maybe draw their attention a little bit more. it's also very important to have some sort, if you're mailing a hard copy of a survey out, to include a stamped returned envelope or some postage paid envelope. Your response rates will greatly increase. And then, consider providing something of value. Oftentimes, local companies will donate gift certificates or have some sort of monetary compensation for folks who fill out the survey. And also really point out the social value and salience of the study that you're putting together. Next slide. Here's a lot of some of what we had learned from people in the community with that Sandy River Community Survey. These are representative of the comments that came from folks and show where the direction of the steering committee will move in response to the survey they put together. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And lastly, if you have open-ended questions on your survey, you could get some pretty interesting comments that could either provide direction to your steering committees and or could be used as additional material to put into your mitigation plan that connects it a little bit more to voices of people who reside in your community. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. Appreciate it. I have a link to the Oregon Partnership for Disaster Resilience in this presentation, so we send it out, or you can also go Google and the work that they do down there. All right, our last speaker here is Derek Hebert. He is the State of Washington Mitigation Strategist with Washington Emergency Management, and he'll speak about some work he did with the City of Everett. Just so you guys know, stick with us till the end here, and we've got a couple things to mention afterwards. Derek, go for it.
Thank you so much, Brett. And can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Are we good, Brett? Okay, excellent, good. So thank you again for having me talk today. I'm a big believer in public engagement, and especially hazard mitigation planning. Back when I was still a student, I was writing my thesis on how hazard mitigation, the participation side and hazard mitigation planning is one of those key outcomes of the plan itself. It's one of the key mitigation actions itself is getting people involved. And with that in mind, when I was working with the Institute for Hazard Mitigation Planning and Research at the University of Washington and was responsible for the City of Everett's Hazard Mitigation 2011 Plan Update, we wanted to try a different style of outreach strategy that would engage people at a level where they could have meaningful contributions to the plan outcome and participate in the plan process in a way that really exceeded that basic FEMA expectation of opportunity to be involved. So what we settled on was a style of format called a World Cafe style. World Cafe they're also a company, so we kind of called it a conversation cafe. This style is a series of rotating roundtables in a room. You'll have each question will be focused. It'll be easily answered, and the idea is that participants in small groups of around 4, perhaps maybe up to 6, will be asked this question. Will have an opportunity to give answers, talk it over amongst themselves. You'll have a note taker that will either be a member of the community, or, as we found more effective, actually one of the project team, sit there, take notes, record the answers to the questions, and then after 10, maybe 15 minutes, maybe less, depending on the group size and the style of questions, they would rotate, and the next group coming would begin where the previous group left off. So it was a series of rotating roundtables with really an iterative learning process with small groups of focused questions, focusing on how to use the answers people were giving to inform actual planning processes. The idea is that you're answering questions that matter. This style of meeting is ideal when you have when you're trying to answer specific kinds of questions. Specifically, when you need information from others, and it's less useful when you're just asking, how people feel about the sky being blue. And I mean that because if you're asking questions of people that are meaningful answers, and then you don't follow up with something realistic in the end, then you will have blown a great opportunity to build community capital. And I say that in the way possible, but when we were successful in getting a very large number of attendees, and if we had not followed through with the idea of them informing the plan, we would have potentially burned a lot of community bridges. So next slide, please. Everett, mid-sized city, has a couple interesting challenges. Won't go into them too much, but the biggest ones are it's fairly elevated, so there's a lot of opportunity for isolation following an earthquake, and there's a lot of industry dependence because of its strong connection to Boeing. So you can next slide. So what we did to get this off the ground was begin by partnering with as many different folks in the community as possible. And we went to the Department of Neighborhoods and we leveraged their resources. We went to the mayor's office, we leveraged theirs. And we were able to expand our outreach to a group that's far beyond the typical people that are reached by a hazard mitigation outreach strategy. And we did this, there are several different tools. One of them is called the Network of Networks. And that's Everett had this, it was an email list of about 100 other email lists, and they could contact everybody from their local volunteers to all of the different parent-teacher associations in the city. The idea was that we would use this process, we would work with the mayor's office in this case, to solicit ideas from residents, and we would use that then to compile strategies and action items and then validate them later on. It was part of an overall participatory strategy, I should say, so this was not a meeting in isolation, but it was extremely useful in that it gave people a real chance to contribute actual strategies. A couple interesting notes about that was, one is we had an entire Saturday, a whole day Saturday blocked out for this. We had over 80 residents attend for the whole day. We did serve food. We had in addition to those 80 residents, we had many city staff, and we had speakers. It was a full program. It wasn't just a public meeting with a little bit of bad coffee. And so that was one of the real reasons it was exciting, and was that people were interested and engaged in this, and they stayed the whole time. And that was because at every stage of the event, there was something else that they would be able to offer and something else, and we found that to be very effective. Next slide, please. So again, back to how it worked for us. Small discussion groups rotating between roundtables with focusing on different populations' potential response to earthquakes and storms. We used earthquakes and storms because they're things people could conceive of. This was our personal strategy, and we focused a lot on questions of individual risk and resilience. But again, it was a part of an overall strategy, and so we were interested in, okay, so how do we protect the individuals? What can they do to mitigate their risk? How do we protect our businesses, a common theme in Everett? And then what are the government actions? What does Everett as a city and Snohomish County as a county need to be doing to mitigate? And then we compile those answers to questions via, as you can see in either of these photos, basically folks sitting at a table talking at and answering questions, and our facilitators taking notes, pointing out things on maps, making sure that we captured people's ideas and thoughts, make sure that if somebody came up with an idea, that we would be able to press it a little bit further. This is great because you're not going to get that kind of blank question that you think it's going the right direction, but if you have a bit of opportunity for back and forth, you'd get it answered. You can do that with this. Additionally, at the end of each part of the day, we would have an opportunity for report outs. We talk about what each table discussed throughout either the morning or the afternoon. And this led, at the end of the day, to a pretty comprehensive picture of and excellent answers for the questions that we had posed. Next slide, please. So the lessons learned, and I'm gonna spend most of my time on these elements, and this is because if you're going to try to replicate this, you can find out how to do a World Cafe in about 5 minutes through a web search. They're very easy. You come up with targeted questions. You get people in a room. You have a bunch of tables, and you have them cycled around the table behind each time. It's a pretty standard, it's pretty easy strategy to implement. However, what was exciting about this was that we were able to, first of all, develop a targeted outreach strategy through the Network of Networks. That's that Everett multi-email listserv, and that we were able to reach the CERT groups throughout the community specifically and got large numbers of them. We got folks that were interested in various elements of mitigation planning, whether they're people who care about historic preservation or people who care about, environmental preservation. And so those kind of combinations were good. We were able to also expand our participation because we scheduled meetings at places. In our particular case, it was at this place called, I think it's called Forest Park. It's a park in Everett that has an excellent meeting hall that's very commonly used. But if we had wanted to expand participation further, we could have potentially held meetings in South Everett or places like that instead. Places where you're not going to get as many people from, but if you were closer, you might get more people. Also, as obvious, you want to locate events at well-known locations. You want to develop and expand your networks. And I say this because if you don't have one, if you don't have a way to reach large numbers of connected citizens at once, it's worth developing one over time. The Department of Neighborhoods, which we worked with at Everett, was an excellent place for that. Additionally, before you begin your outreach strategy, develop a comprehensive plan for it. Don't just start with a World Cafe without thinking about how you're going to incorporate what you get in the plan. Don't just ask questions without running those questions through every possible, additional city department you can think of, trying to make them narrow and focused, also extremely meaningful and valuable. Also engage elected leaders, and as I said before, other departments, and then engage those who own your vulnerability and mitigate actions. In Everett, this was businesses and residents in potentially isolated neighborhoods and vulnerable and underrepresented populations. We identified these people. They're the ones who actually own vulnerability outside of a couple of specific mitigation issues like the water system in Everett. And if we want them to reduce our city's risk, we have to make sure that they're the ones who are coming to that meeting, or at least among those who are coming to the meeting. And so that was one element that we really focused on, was trying to reach those people specifically. Have fun with the process. I say this because people typically agonize over the public meeting side of things. There's really not a reason for it. This is one of those opportunities you can build support for your projects and your work. And I know I sound a bit Pollyanna about this, but with coming from the right place, making sure that you're clearly open for input, you can have a successful public project that builds your social capital in the neighborhood and in your community, that increases your visibility as an agency or organization, and that ultimately leads to additional support for you as an institution as you try to implement your mitigation actions.
Eric, thank you. Awesome, yeah.
Thank
you. All right, folks, just last two slides. Then you know what? I'm going to put a poll up here in just a minute. I know we're just a couple minutes past the hour. Appreciate you hanging in there. Just a little going back through what we've talked about. This is the APA even putting this out. It's not just FEMA. Design the public engagement process with the end in mind. Select tactics that invite a broad range of stakeholders. You got a lot of different things that you guys can be doing. Frame and reframe issues and make it important to them. You got to be compelling. You've got to be able to do the storytelling. You've got to be able to speak to emotions. It's not just about facts out there. And of course, you've been heard, and here are the results. You've got to be able to get back to them saying, I hear what you're saying. Here's how we're using it or not using it, and give it back. You want to get them to be part of this, and provide the status of implementation. What are you doing? So I got this quote yesterday, and I thought it was a really good quote from a book, because we're the ones that give me on the other side here, the other side. Today, as we as citizens in our places need to grow up, we need to move beyond the parent-child relationship we have had with our places and take our place as adults at the table. We are full participatory partners in the process of city making. While there is no equality of power in this relationship, there is required an equality of caring. We are capable of doing extraordinary things to make our neighborhoods and even our entire cities better than we care to do so. We can be makers and co-creators of the content that is our community. The first step is the mature realization that we can and should play a part in the process, and that is up to us to make that process and to invite our community members. All right, I hope you guys learned a few things today. These materials, I'm going to open up a poll here, should be in your panel, and please let us know how we're doing here. But I hope you learned, got some tips. You've learned, obviously, our Code of Federal Regulations, what's required, different strategies that are part of this, why it's important to do it. We got a lot of resources here that we want you guys to be able to use. We've had some questions coming through that it looks like, Derek, appreciate you giving me on answering some of this. The one that I would speak to is a question about if we had, we're an agency that people don't look upon us, they don't want us in their community. I say if your agency isn't looked well upon to go out and do the community engagement, find a neutral organization or someone to help facilitate that can help be the ones that do the public participation or that community engagement. Really key part to bring in these other groups that might be able to facilitate it. Next month, mitigation planning grants, show me the money. All right, we're not focusing on the project, we're gonna do the planning grants. We got Stephen Randolph, our senior specialist with Hazard Mitigation Assistance here, Angie Lane, the Oregon State Hazard Mitigation Officer, and Susan Cleverly from Idaho State Hazard Mitigation Officer to speak to our grants. We're going to be talking about what are eligible grant activities for planning grants, tips on developing a scope of work, what are eligible costs and what aren't. Unfortunately, all those donuts I keep showing, they're not eligible cost. Sorry about that. The coffee might be, though. We got a great calendar of events coming up. You guys should be able to see this in your emails and be able to, hopefully you guys can participate, one or all. And we have in-person training. A lot of this stuff, the materials, we're probably doing more on these webinars we might cover in class, but a lot of things coming up in our 4 states. Really excited to be able to get out and do this local mitigation planning workshop. If you're outside of Region 10, I'm sorry. Well, actually, you guys can come on over. Why not? But I know your regions also deliver G318s. The states are out there doing it. Take a peek at, talk to your state mitigation officers, state mitigation planners. But this is what we're going to be hosting here in our region for G318 local mitigation planning workshop trainings. Again, these slides will go out. You get all this. And here's your team. For each of our states, we got a lot of great people that are helping to help you guys develop, advocate, regulate for these plans. And you guys can contact your state partners here in Region 10. If you're outside of our region, we can help you guys out to get in touch with the appropriate FEMA mitigation, regional mitigation planners. And with that, I think we're going to call it an hour and 7 minutes. So thanks for joining us.